Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the RC Flight School. And today we want to talk about batteries. And these are LiPo batteries, which are lithium polymer batteries. These have a tremendous amount of energy stored inside of them. But there's a couple terms that we want to go over so that you're familiar with what this means. Because without a battery, the airplane will not do anything. You can't power it, you can't fly it, you can do nothing but look at it until you add the battery to it. This is our power source for our RC airplanes. And there's a couple things to know, both in terms of what these batteries mean, like what all the numbers on them mean, and also some safety things that go along with it. So we're going to start with the first one is the size, right? So we have a lot of variation. You got this little guy here, and you got this great big guy here. Now, this guy here is a 1S battery. This is actually like the same type of battery that Logan has in his Sport Cub that came with the Ready to Fly version. It's just a little one cell battery. It's 220 milliamp, just a little guy, right? This guy here is a 5,000 milliamp 6S battery that goes in my e-flite P51 Mustang. Obviously, there's a huge amount of variation between these two guys, right? Just a little guy, great big guy. So let's kind of talk about what these mean, right? So there's a lot of batteries that can be used in RC planes. It's the most important that you pick the battery designed for your plane. If your plane calls for a 1S battery, don't hook up a 6S battery. If it calls for a 6S battery, don't plug in a 1S battery. Now, granted, that was very far-fetched, but there's this intermediate area between a 3S battery and a 4S battery that a lot of times I think it's important that there is some carryover. A plane that's specifically designed for a 3S battery can only fly in a 3S battery without modifications. A plane designed for 4S battery should really only be flown on a 4S battery, not a 6S battery, and really not a 3S battery either. It should be flown on a 4S. The Habu STS that Logan will be learning on is capable of flying on both 3S and 4S. Read your manual because the manual will tell you whether or not that's possible. Not all planes can do that, right? So what is this 3S, 4S, 1S, 6S? What is all that? Well, that's the cell count. This is a 1S battery. It's one cell, right? So you can see this little silvery area in here. That's the cell of the battery, okay? These two here are 2S batteries, but they look totally different, right? Well, this 2S battery is actually nice because you can see inside of it, right? It's got two packets, basically, of the battery. And that's a 2-cell battery. It just has a lot more capacity than this guy here, right? So the capacity as well as the cell count dictate the size. 1S, 1 cell. 2S, 2 cell. 3S, 4S, you kind of get the picture, right? So an S count is what?
It's the amount of cells.
It's the amount of cells. More cells, more power, but more weight. A Sport Cub that flies on a 1S battery will not fly with this battery attached to it. This thing weighs like probably 4 times as much as the actual airplane. Okay? So there's also a lot of other numbers on here. For instance, this 4S battery here is a 5,000 milliamp, and this is a 2,200 milliamp. There's a huge size difference between these two guys, right? 4S, 4S. 22 and a 5,000. Think of that as the size of your gas tank, right? A 2200 is basically like, this is how much fuel you have in terms of electrical energy on board. So I have almost twice as much with this 5,000. So you could fly for longer, depending on, you have more fuel in the tank, right? A bigger battery tends to give you more flight time, but weighs a lot more, right? So an airplane designed for a 2200 is going to fly terrible on a 5000 because it's too heavy. Best thing to do, follow the recommendations in your manual. If it calls for a 22, fly with a 22. If it calls for a 5000, fly with a 5000. Fly with what the manual says. The other numbers that are on here is, and this particular one is 30C. The C rating of the battery is the discharge rate. Higher the C rating, 30, 40, 100, whatever that number is, the higher the C rate, the higher the discharge rate. it can pull the energy out faster, right? So a 100C battery can get rid of the energy in the battery at a much faster rate than a 30C, okay? Once again, fly for what the airplane is designed to do. Most planes fly between a 30 and a 40C discharge rate and are just fine. If you have a 30C battery and you fly it in a plane that requires a 100C battery, the battery cannot get rid of the energy fast enough. You will damage the battery. Conversely, if it's the plane flies on it recommends a 30C battery and you fly it on 100C, it really is not going to do much because it's only going to be pulling in at that 30C rate because that's all it needs. It doesn't need all the rest of it. So you can go with a higher C rating battery easier than you can go with a low rating one if the airplane needs it, okay? You don't want to pull that energy out too fast, okay? So that covers the kind of the main terms of what makes up a battery, right? So we have, we'll use this one as a review again. So this is a 4S battery, and the 4S means what?
It's the amount of cells.
And 2200 is what?
It's the capacity.
It's like how much gas is in the tank, right? And the C rating, 30C, means what?
The discharge rate.
Yep, exactly. Very good job, Logan. You're catching on to this pretty quickly. So now, you don't ever want to fly a battery without it being fully charged. Just the same as you don't drive across country without a full tank of gas in your car, right? So always charge up your battery before you go fly and never charge unattended. When the battery is charging, be around it, right? Just in case anything were to happen. It short circuits, the charger goes bad, who knows? Lots of things could potentially happen. The safe thing is just be around. Don't hook up the charger and then go leave for the day or for a week and expect everything to, chances are you'll be fine. Don't risk it. If you're charging, just be around, okay? Put it on a charger, be in the area, make sure that you're being safe. You can buy charging bags to put the battery in, just to make sure that if anything did happen, it would be contained. You can also buy battery boxes, which will, you keep the battery inside it while it's charging. If anything were to happen, it can ventilate some of the gases out of there. But the most important thing is don't leave it unattended, okay? Also, don't get it wet. Don't drop it in water. Don't shoot at it with something. And if you crash and the battery is all mangled and starts puffing up, recycle that battery immediately. If you charge a battery or you get done flying and the battery is really, really hot, that's a warning sign that something isn't quite right. If it begins to kind of puff up like a balloon, you got something serious going on there as well. Most of these batteries have a lot of flights on them, and as you can see, they maintain their regular shape. But as they begin to age, they begin to degrade a little bit as well. But for the most part, if they maintain their rectangular shape like you see here with a new battery, you're doing in good shape. And if you fly the airplane, everything's flying normal, you're in good shape as well. So the next thing I want to cover is don't run the battery down to zero. For those of us who are like old school RC, like drove cars back in the 80s and 90s, you used to have to run your battery down to zero, right? Do not do that with a LiPo battery. Somewhere in that 30 to 40% of its capacity. So you figure there's 100%. When you get down in this range down here, 30, 40%, obviously my finger is not accurate. You can't actually see the level of electricity in there, right? But you're in that 30 to 40% range. That's when you want to call it a day and bring the battery back in and charge it up. Do not fly the battery to zero. That is a very bad thing to do. It damages the battery. It's hard on the battery. It can cause the chemistry to get a little off kilter. So do not overly discharge the battery. You can set a timer so your airplane lands when you got 30 to 40%. But if you got a smart battery with a smart receiver and smart transmitter and everything is talking to each other, it can set up an alert either with a light system or an audio alert that says, hey, your battery's running low, you need to come in for a landing. Very popular. This happens quite a bit with these 1S batteries. If you are flying along and the motor starts pulsing, so you're flying along and all of a sudden, you hear the motor starting to pulse, that's telling you that the engine is at, or the motor is at low voltage cutoff, right? That's telling you your battery is really too low. You need to get this thing down immediately. So if you have any of your airplanes and it starts to do that pulsing of the motor, you need to land immediately. The key is don't ever let your motor get to that point, or get your battery to get to that point where the motor is pulsing. Set your timer so you land with about 30 to 40% of the capacity still left in it. So we talked about charging. Don't ever let it charge unattended. Don't ever let it run down completely. And you want to charge it at kind of a slow rate. Yeah, I know it takes a while, but you want to make sure you charge it so that the batteries, don't overcharge it. Don't charge it too fast as well. For chargers, you can use something as this little Spectrum S150. This is a great 3S, 4S entry-level charger, non-programmable. You can use a programmable charger in some of these other high-end batteries, but for a beginner, if you buy the RTF model, like the Habu that Logan's going to be flying with, it comes with a charger, and it's great to get you started in the hobby, and that's really all you need to do. There's a lot more to the batteries than we covered here, but for the most part, read your manual, buy the batteries that go along with that airplane, and I can say don't buy the cheapest battery you find. I've done that before, and you end up having to recycle those things way faster because they just don't last. So buy a quality battery, buy a battery that's meant for your airplane. And one last thing before we wrap up the battery discussion here is I just want to review what some of these what these cords are that stick out, right? This here is kind of your main harness, right? Mm-hmm. And this has the connector on it, and this is an IC style connector. This is an IC5. The I is unique to Spectrum. It's their intelligent. It's got a little extra third plug in there, right? So there's an EC and an IC. The I has the little extra wire in there. That's what you need to take care of the telemetry. It needs the I version with the extra wire in there. But make sure that you match the type of plug in your airplane to the type of plug that is on your battery. The second set of wires here is we call it the balance lead. Each one of these wires goes to one of the cells inside the battery, and that talks back to the charger to basically tell it what the voltage is and what the capacity is. So newest generation Spectrum batteries do not have a balance lead, so that part is not there anymore. But for the most part, most of us are going to have batteries that have both a balance lead and this. And it's important to make sure that when you're charging, both of those are hooked up if your battery and charger are needed. When it's flying, you never really need that set of wires. It's really just this one. And when you go to hook up the aircraft, power your transmitter first, then hook up your battery next, okay? So a quick review. This is what kind of battery?
This is LiPo battery.
LiPo battery, lithium polymer. You got it. And 2200 is?
The capacity.
4S is?
The amount of cells.
And the 30C?
Is the discharge rate.
And can I put a 100C battery in a plane that needs 30?
No, you shouldn't.
You shouldn't, but you can.
You can.
Can I put a 30C battery in a plane that needs 100?
No.
No. You got it. Exactly right, Logan. For the most part, you guys don't really have to worry about this. Look at your manual. Buy the batteries that's for your plane, and you honestly don't have much to worry about. Should I charge this battery unattended?
No.
Should I charge this battery in the rain?
No.
Should I shoot at the battery?
No.
No. If the battery becomes puffed, what should I do?
You should recycle it.
You should recycle it. That's exactly right. Should I run the battery down to 0?
No.
Should I fly on a battery at 0?
No.
See, Logan's picking up on this stuff pretty quick. There's really not much to it. The basics are just be safe, be smart, don't drop the batteries, handle them with care, you'll be fine. So if there's a lot more on the internet to know about LiPo batteries, but this is enough for a beginner pilot to at least have some understanding. So, all right, well, that wraps up this episode on LiPo batteries. And RC Flight School will be moving on to the Habu next as we talk about a little bit of the aircraft and then flight sim time.